So if you were speaking to a Spanish teacher, a young Spanish person, 24 years old, who wanted to be a primary school teacher, um, what level of English would you say would they need to achieve on the European framework scale? What level do you think would be a good level for a CLIL teacher to, or a minimum level for a CLIL teacher to acquire?
Middle in that scale, around the middle. In the Canary Islands, we have a very exciting movement towards teaching through CLIL in primary and secondary. Andalusia has a very, as you know, has a very big operation going on. In fact, Spain, I think now is the hotbed of innovating language learning. And of course, CLIL is not just about English. I mean, today we are talking about English, but in Barcelona, it actually applies to Catalan as equally as English. It is not bound to English, but as I know, we're focusing on English today. Spain has a number of problems with English language. I've seen that very, very clearly. Young adolescents just not interested. I've been recently to seminars, to conferences where new innovative ideas have been presented by publishers for primary school teachers. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, but that was yesterday. That actually is what we were doing in the 1970s when I was trained as a language teacher. This activity that you're presenting is fun. Yes, it is. You know, okay, kids, I'm going to give you 2,500 euros. You can spend that money to go to England. Now go into pairs and talk about, do you want to stay with a family? Do you want to stay in a residence? Do you want to travel to Scotland? It's vacuous. It's empty compared to, okay, in our primary school, we are going to set up a CLIL program. This CLIL program will involve 3 teachers, the language teacher and 2 others who volunteer and feel, even if they're worried about their English, that they would like to be part of this because they can see that this is more than English. This is actually an innovative incubator of an exciting experience for the children. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick something where we can all contribute. So now what could we take? Okay, we could take health and lifestyle because that's in the curriculum. We could take environmental sciences. Okay, let's take environmental sciences. What we're going to do is we're going to have 2 hours a week of environmental sciences where we're going to talk about the environment and lifestyle. So we're going to set up very easily, for free, without a lot of work, projects where the children in the school in Cordoba are actually going to communicate in their own time with the children in Bangkok and the children in Montreal. And they're going to try to work out actually how many kilowatts of power, how many liters of water are used in those countries for the lifestyle. And they're going to try to understand why is it that Canada or Australia are such big users of resources compared to Spain. Okay, so you're going to set up a project like that. Now, the project can be set up very easily. There are platforms out there that have been around for a long time. Science Across the World was one of the big first ones, and it's still available, and it's still operating, and it's still very good. Because what they do is they provide the teacher with the project idea, with the contacts, with the school contacts, and with the whole apparatus to set up the project. What you're doing is, let's say it's 2 hours a week in your Spanish primary school. What you're doing is you're providing teachers with actually a fun thing to do. And one of the advantages with doing this in English is that you'll find that the Spanish teachers actually enjoy learning English as they're doing this thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You also find that they are developing ways, the data from the Canary Islands, where primary school children are talking about their experience of learning through English. You're firing up children in a way which is not easy to do actually when you're teaching your normal ways of teaching. I mean, we all have successes with children, and primary is a wonderful level for having lots of happy children. But with CLIL, in this way, opening up the world to the child, empowering the child to become a scientist, the successes can be very great. So when we talk about CLIL, you mentioned earlier that it's an umbrella term. Yes, it's an umbrella term because it takes from existing excellent practice certain key methodological features and it brings them together in a new way. And it's an umbrella term because there are different ways of doing this, and the payoff or the advantages gained can actually be gained quite quickly. It's a little bit like chocolate or perfume. You don't necessarily need a lot of this to trigger a very positive response, because one of the first positive responses of the children is fun. Actually, it's actually fun, and this is important in Spain, it's self-confidence towards English. Yeah, the children may come from a family where their parents don't speak English, and the empowerment for the child to feel good about the English, because they're actually talking to a real kid in Bangkok who is also using English as a second language. These are very, very interesting payoffs. If I can summarize, if I can sort of give a metaphor for CLIL, I was traveling a few years ago with one of my children, and it was a weekend, and we were in Australia, and it was Saturday, and I said, so what do you want to do tonight? She said, well, I'd like to go to the circus. And I went, what? The circus? I don't know about you, Donald, but I never liked the circus when I was young. I didn't like the noise and the sad animals.
It was a very sad experience, yes.
Those depressed clowns, you know. So, but, you know, as fathers do, fathers give in to their daughters. So I said, okay, let's go and get the tickets for the circus. Well, the tickets were horrendously expensive, and that shocked me. But anyway, we went to the circus. This was no circus. This was Cirque du Soleil. It was my first experience of watching Cirque du Soleil. And, you know, sad as it may sound, I actually began to think of CLIL when I was watching this incredible performance, because I thought, what these people have done here is that they've taken a basic concept, the circus, just as we have the basic concept of learning English or education, and they've gone out and they've brought in the most quality types of experience from different areas, you know, from drama, from aerobics, from acrobatics, from opera. They brought them together to produce a powerful entertainment experience. I think with CLIL, this is what we're doing. We're pulling in the best of learning methodology which actually may not be in English language. It may be in geography, it may be in mathematics, it may be in chemistry. We're bringing the teachers together who are learning that, oh my goodness, English language teaching methods actually have a lot to teach me in how I teach geography. And, you know, teaching geography, which is like problem-based and focus-based, has a lot to actually give the English language teacher. We know that the English language teacher, who is already probably overworked and underpaid and a bit stressed, doesn't have a lot of time doesn't have time in the curriculum to teach more English. But by bringing these people together and bringing these together as thematic modules, there is time and there is the possibility of implementing CLIL. So for me, CLIL is a little bit like Cirque du Soleil.
That's fascinating. And what about the future? What would you say to one of our students who wants to be a professional teacher? Do you think in the future most schools in Spain will be bilingual?
Oh, I truly hope so. I truly hope they will be bilingual, and I truly hope they will be trilingual. The research on trilingual education is less deep than that of bilingual education, but the research now coming from the educational neurosciences is really very, very exciting in terms of even to some extent trilingualism. We are naturally geared up to know more than one language, you know, and language is not just English, Spanish, French. I mean, language is actually body language. Language is mathematics. In fact, there are languages all around us. And as babies and youngsters, we are geared up to be able to take in different languages. The critics who say, oh, no, no, bilingual education, very bad, it's slowing the child down, you know, or their vocabulary is not so good in their first language as their second language. They are not looking at the holistic value of having bilingual schools. The trouble with the term bilingual is it's a bad word in a way. It's a loaded word. I just came back from the States, and it was a word I deliberately did not use during my work there, because in the States it is actually still seen as a derogatory word. It's seen as something bad. Well, for me, monolingualism is something bad. And if we can give children an ability to have a deeper level learning of another language certainly from grade 2 upwards, we are going to be enriching them. Can I just say a little bit more about
this? Yes, please do.
Yeah, because this is actually something which certainly those of you in the audience could read up on if you wish. There's a 20-page summary report which was produced through the European Commission, which is really, really fascinating, I think, for anybody working in languages or working in education. I think it was 2007 when I was leading a research team on this question. What is there out there in research which shows the impact of knowing another language on the brain, the mind of a person? So this is what we call a meta-study, right? We looked at actually about 3,000 or more research reports. We had top experts saying this is good, this is no good, this is good, and we boiled it all down to a few hundred research reports, important research reports. And then we looked at what is actually in common with the results of these research studies on people who know their first language and another language to a certain amount. You know, bilingual, we always say 100% of this, 100% of that. That hardly exists. Basically, it's always a bit of this and a bit of that. First of all, the research was very interesting in terms of, do you know the language in your head? Like, I know French in my head, but I am pathetic when I turn up in Paris and try and buy a train ticket. Or are you using the language fairly regularly, fairly, you know, like every couple of days, every day, every week, and so on? And the results for those who were using the language were more, in a way, exciting than those who just said, yeah, I know my first language and I know English or whatever. The results were particularly important in terms of what we call thinking skills and cognitive flexibility, the ability to look at things from different angles. It sounds like a cliche, but it is in the research. Having the two languages in the head, you have an option of switching from Spanish to English to Spanish when you're solving a problem. You have two frameworks in your brain in order to actually tackle a problem, which is fantastic. It's called divergent thinking and so on. The second thing was the problem-solving skills were much better with the two-language people than the one-language people. If the problem was simple, like, here's your 2,000 euros, go to England, tell me if you want to live with a family in Bolton, there was no difference. But if the problem was challenging, like try to understand why it is that Australians use so much power compared to people who live in a similar climate, then the results were much better. The awareness of language, we call it metalinguistic awareness, the awareness of me as a person trying to get you to come to the cinema with me, to do things with language, is much greater with those youngsters because they can approach things from different ways, and their empathy for other people is better. Most excitingly for education, and this is where I think that your question about should Spanish schools be bilingual or so on, those two languages can actually improve my capacity to learn. My learning capacity is linked directly to my short-term memory, and there is evidence that the short-term memory of the people with the two languages is somehow more powerful than those who are monolingual. And that is a very important issue. And when I started seeing this, I thought, gosh, is this why, when I was a child, I was made to learn Latin and Greek? I mean, after all, I was learning Latin. It was the so-called dead language. Was that actually to help me understand my own English? Or were there educational people who said, actually, if you teach Latin and Greek to English kids in English schools, it kind of oxygenates their thinking capacities. So those were some of the very real gains to be had from actively using another language. And some of the research shows that the neurological changes happen very quickly, much more quickly than whether you're at C2 or whatever on the Common European Framework. They actually happen very quickly in CLIL type, what they call them, immersive environments. In those environments where, as to come back to the glass of water, in those environments where most of the children are actually swimming, but there's a certain uncertainty. And this is actually relates to what Vygotsky calls the zone of proximal development, but we're not going to go into that now because I think that's another lesson.
Okay,